Hi, and welcome to the last of our lessons in Module 2 of the Emotional Healing Program. Thanks for joining us this evening. Tonight we're going to be talking about sort of the ultimate emotional healing tool, which is actually awareness and the idea of getting into the love and light. So we have in this module talked about the three primary emotions that we consider negative: anger, fear, and grief. And we've talked about the positive purpose in all these emotions and constructive ways of learning to use these emotions to make positive changes in our life. All of this revolves around bringing us back to a state of awareness. And so tonight's presentation is going to kind of talk about what I mean by awareness and the benefit that this has in our lives. So I want to start off with the concept that we all have a story. We have created in our minds a story that we tell ourselves about our life, about who we are, about what we are. And we also tell this story to other people. And the story that we've created about ourselves defines the sense of who we are and is a way of explaining to ourselves what our life experiences mean. And the story can also become a way of dodging your emotions, of not getting really in touch with what's going on inside of you. Because you can tell your story over and over and over again, and it never changes anything. In fact, it just reinforces it. So one of the secrets to doing emotional healing, and this is working with yourself and also with working with other people, just a second, ears a little bother me there, is to get past the story and move into the feelings that are behind the story, that are motivating the story, so that you can actually start changing this. So your story originated with the fact that you were one time a little kid and you had a limited understanding of the world. We still have a limited understanding of the world, okay? And our brain likes to come up with explanations for things. So we create the story trying to make sense out of the things that we experience. And sometimes these stories are also given to us by grown-ups and authority figures who also tell us the meaning of what we've been through. And we can become so identified with these explanations that we actually believe that the explanation is real, that it is actually the truth. And that is often not really the case. Because if you look at this as kind of like a pyramid, your story that you tell yourself about what happened to you, okay, is at the top of the pyramid. And underneath that are facts and observations. Now, facts and observations are objective facts. So, like if I say got divorced 20 years ago, and I say, that lion, cheating, whatever, blah, 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 deserted me, and they left me with this and this and this and blah, blah, blah. That's the story. The facts behind the story are you had problems in your marriage and your marriage broke up. Okay? Those are the observable facts. The fact that you got divorced is a fact. It's not an interpretation of the facts, all right? But what's underneath your story, behind those facts, is the feelings and emotions you have about that. The feelings of betrayal, the feelings of heartache, the feelings of loss, the feelings of whatever. And your story, is a way of trying to explain the feelings and emotions that came up because of the facts. And those feelings and emotions point to unmet physical and emotional needs. That is, that the reason why we have the feelings is because we have needs. It's just like we have a body sensation of hunger, we have a body sensation of thirst, what we've been talking about. how anger is a need to feel like we're in control of our lives and we have good personal boundaries. Grief is a longing to fill an emptiness created by something we've lost. All of these feelings all link into things that we need mentally and emotionally to go. So what often happens with people is in counseling or in talking about what happened in the past, they're stuck in the story, okay? And they can't sort the facts of the story from the feelings and emotions of the story, which they have interpreted in a certain way, and that's what's caused to create the story. And they can't get in touch with the unmet physical and emotional needs that they need to do something to try to meet. And so the whole idea in emotional healing is that we start with the story, but we don't stop with the story. We take the facts and observations and move into the feelings and emotions, and then move into the needs that are behind them. Now, one important thing to realize is that since you are the one who wrote the story in the first place, you're perfectly capable of rewriting the story. Once you realize that your story is not the facts and observations, it's your interpretation of the facts and observations. And you can change your interpretation of what happened to you. You can change the way you see your life experiences and the explanation you tell yourself about the life experiences. So there's a popular model of psychology that says that our behavior is conditioned by stimulus and response. That is, if we get rewarded or punished for certain behaviors, it conditions us to do certain things to avoid other things. And so this model of psychology basically says that I'm the victim of my past. So my parents abused me, therefore, this is the way things are, and blah, 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 and there's nothing I can do to change it, and so forth. But when we have habitually interpreted, what happened to us in a certain way, it becomes a habit, okay? And habits basically are a wonderful thing, a wonderful thing and a bad thing, depending on what kind of habits you create. Anything that we repeatedly do, our brain gets into a rut to do it automatically. It becomes such a part of us that we forget that at one time we had to learn it. One time we didn't know how to do it. Like you don't have to think about walking. Anybody who's driven for a long time doesn't have to think about driving, but you did when you first started, and you had to do it consciously, and then it became a habit. Well, when you're learning something, you have to be aware. You have to see what's going on and make adjustments and changes and so forth. But as you get into a rut in your life, and your story is a rut, then you basically lose the awareness that you have the capability of reprogramming yourself. Because in between stimulus and response is a choice. Okay, one person who was abused as a child grows up to be an axe murderer. Another person who is abused as a child grows up to be a saint and do all kinds of good in the world. And all of that is conditioned on the choice they make. But in order to make choice, you have to have awareness. You have to be able to sit and recognize, okay, this is what happened to me. How am I going to respond to it? And when I become aware that that's what I've done, is that the story I'm telling myself is what I've conditioned myself to respond in a certain way, then I can bring my awareness to that, and I can say, okay, I'm going to change that. I'm going to rewrite that. I don't want that story in my life anyway. Because otherwise, what you're doing is you're kind of sleepwalking through life. You're basically, one of my favorite authors, Anthony DeMello, that I probably have some quotes from him in here. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a tickle in my throat. Okay. Talks about the fact that you can't sin in awareness. That you sin because you basically are not aware of what you're doing. Like Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Because If you were aware, you probably wouldn't have done it, but you get into these ruts or these conditioned habitual responses, and you act without thinking. And those habits of belief and behavior and emotion are so deeply ingrained that you just believe that's the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it. It's who you are. Yeah. Quote from Anthony DeMello. He says, spirituality means waking up. Waking up means becoming conscious, becoming aware. Even though they don't know it, most people are asleep. Okay. They're born asleep. They live asleep. They marry in their sleep. They breed children in their sleep. They die in their sleep, and they never wake up. In other words, everything's running on autopilot. Everything's running on pure stimulus response, conditioning. And they never become aware of what Viktor Frankl, who was a psychologist who believed in the stimulus response model, and then when he went into the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, he observed that although most people, when treated like animals, he said, acted like animals, here and there a person who was treated like an animal rose to become a saint. And he realized that in between stimulus and response was choice. And you always had a choice. But see, most people are asleep. They're just running on conditioned response. They're never exercising their power of choice. And this is from one of Anthony DeMello's books, Conversations with the Masters. And it's a bunch of fictitious stories about a fictitious spiritual master that and the little stories tell things. So this is just one of the stories. How long will it take me to solve my problem? Asked the disciple. And the response is not 1 second longer than it takes you to understand it. Not 1 second longer than it takes you to understand it. The reason that you can't solve these emotional problems and this baggage from the past and everything is because you don't understand it. You're telling yourself a story about it, but the story isn't real. The story isn't true. The story is false, and therefore you can't fix it. You have to become aware. You have to see that the story is wrong, and you have to consciously become aware of what really was going on, and then you can fix it, which means you have to get past the story you've written. So in order to cultivate awareness, you have to start learning to observe things without analyzing it, without having to come up with a story to explain it. It just is. You don't have to interpret it. It just is. And you also have to learn how to see past words and symbols, because words are just symbols. Words aren't even real. Words are representations. If words were real, there wouldn't be hundreds of different languages in the earth with hundreds of different words to represent the same thing, reality. You wouldn't have, an apple would be an apple in every language. It's not. They're different words in different languages to describe the same reality, an apple. So words are just images. They're just idols. They're representations of reality. They aren't even reality. But you get so caught up in the words, so caught up in the story, so caught up in what your chatter going on in your brain that you don't ever actually see what's there anymore. You just analyze it with your chatter. And so you have to learn to be present. You have to learn to calm down the monkey chatter, get past the words and symbol, and you just look at what's there and see it without trying to analyze it, pick it apart, figure out why it is. Just understand what it is. And this is a quote from the passage of Isaiah. It says, "Make the heart of this people fat and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart." Notice that. Not understand with their mind, understand with their heart, and be converted and be healed. In other words, we have to learn to actually see with our eyes. We have to actually learn to hear with our ears, not through the lens of our judgments and stories and beliefs and everything, but just absolutely just to be able to see and hear what things are and understand it in our heart, in our inner emotional being. And then we can be healed. But most of us don't, because our ears are heavy, we've shut our eyes, and our heart is hardened. I think that's the modern term we'd use for that, is for a fat heart would be a hardened heart. Our heart is hardened, and therefore we can't genuinely understand. So there's a concept from psychology called observing ego, which is the ability that we have to step back from our own thoughts and feelings and observe them objectively. In other words, if you were looking at someone who's processing one of their trauma vortexes and they're saying the kinds of crazy things that people say on trauma vortexes, like you always do that, or you never do this, or everybody does that, or nobody does that, and blah, 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 and that kind of thing. And you're observing that objectively. You go, well, that's not true, right? You can see very readily that they're operating from an inner paradigm that isn't true. And it's obvious to you. But if you try to say to them, wait a minute, that isn't true, they'll probably get mad at you, they'll probably argue with you, blah, 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 because they're in the middle of a trauma vortex and they're not awake, they're not aware. Their conscious mind is not engaged enough to analyze what's going on. They're just responding out of stimulus response, conditioned response. You do the same thing. And so it's easy to look at somebody else going through their trauma vortex and go, oh, look at that, that's crazy. But when you're going through your trauma vortex and you're in that place where everybody does this, nobody's that, and blah, blah, and your like story is coming through, you do the same thing. You defend it. you don't want to hear to somebody who's not saying it because you're really not talking about what the words you're using and the quote unquote facts you're saying aren't really the facts. They're trying to express the emotion that you feel and the unmet emotional needs. And you have to learn to see yourself, step back and see your own behavior as if it was somebody else doing it. That's where you then drop into the ability to go back into breaking stimulus and response, because you go, wait a minute, okay, why am I reacting this way? What is going on inside of me? Why do I feel this way about that, etc.? And then you have the capability of changing it. Until you do that, you never will be able to change it, because you'll never understand what's going on. How long will it take you to solve your problem? Not 1 second longer than it takes you to understand it, to see it, to be able to step back from it, look at it and see it objectively, and then have a change. This is what happens in emotional healing work. People have these epiphanies, these sudden, like instantaneous lightning flashes of, wow, okay, and they see things completely differently. And everything changes in a split second. And stuff that they've struggled with for years, like I told about in the first session with me, suddenly it's gone. But it was because the self-awareness allowed them to see what was going on and understand it. And then boom, that led to be able to make the changes that started healing it. Awareness is something you can only do in the present. If you're thinking about the past or you're thinking about the future, you're not aware. You're telling a story. You're making up a story, or you're telling your story that you've already made up. Because the truth exists in the present, and cultivating the ability to be present, such as Eckhart Tolle writes about, Power of Now, is a really vital skill. The one time I was praying and God said, there's only one eternity, the eternal now, the eternal presence. I dwell in the presence, in the present, in this moment. You see, there's this idea that salvation takes place some future time. You know, I'm going to go to heaven or hell in the future. Well, I'm already in my own heaven or hell. Okay? And everything that God does is in the present, because eternity is the present moment. It's eternally now. It's never the past. It's never the future. All those things only exist in my mind. The future exists as possibilities. The past exists as what has already transpired and cannot be changed. So all change occurs in the present, and all awareness occurs in the present. And all the ability to be aware and to change the stimulus response occurs in the present moment, right now, in this instant. So cultivating and learning how to create present moments awareness is really important, both for you in working with other people and for you working on yourself. Those are several ways that you can cultivate this. And I use these when I'm doing emotional healing work with other people, as well as I've learned to use them with myself. The first one is paying attention to what's going on inside of your body right now. In fact, which also includes feeling your feelings. See, you can only feel in the present. Your body only exists in the present. Your body doesn't exist in the past. Your body doesn't exist in the future. Your body exists right here and right now. So if you're tuning into your body, if you're tuning into the sensations of your body, then you're present in your body. And you have power to change things when you are present in your body. When you are detached from your body and you're off in the clouds, daydreaming, blah, 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 and you're ignoring your body and you're disconnecting from your body, which happens with people who've been emotionally traumatized. They disconnect from their body. They withdraw their awareness from the parts of the body where that are associated with the trauma. And those parts of their body become numb and they lose presence in their body. They can become kind of out of it. And the more you're disconnected from the body, the crazier you are, because you're disconnected from the reality of the moment. So if you just sit and you take some deep breaths and you close your eyes and you notice your fingers and you notice your arms and you notice your body and you notice the sensations and input and things that are coming in from your body, you will begin to move into a present moment awareness. You'll start to feel what's happening in your body. And your body is actually the best nutritionist, the best teacher for how to be healthy that you have, because your body is constantly telling you that you just did this and it annoyed me, or you did this and it helped me, with giving you constant feedback about that you need water or you need food or you need rest or you need whatever. But most of us are just so disconnected from our body and so disconnected from the reality of our body that we pay more attention to what a book says about what we need, or what a teacher like me says that we need, than we do what our own body says we need. So noticing your body is one way to create present moment awareness. And always when I'm doing emotional healing work, I'm going to go to the third one here. I'm always saying, and how did that feel? In fact, I'm going to just drop out of the slide presentation for a second and just elaborate on this. This is a tool for getting a person out of the story. Someone's telling their story. They're saying, oh, my husband left me 20 years ago. He abandoned me with three kids. What a jerk, blah, 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 da, da, da. Okay, so they're telling their story. All right. And so you ask this question. All right. And how did that make you feel? Well, of course, I was very angry, blah, 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 blah. And where do you feel that anger? Now, the where did you feel it is taking them out of that there's a intellectual idea that I'm angry, and there's a bodily reality that I'm angry. All right? And emotions are a body reality. They're not an intellectual idea. They're a body reality. If you're actually feeling an emotion, okay, you are feeling it in the present moment. You can't feel it in the past. When you're thinking about something from the past and there's a feeling, you're feeling the feeling in the present moment. So if you tune into the feeling, you've moved from thinking about the past to thinking about the present. And the feeling that you're having concerning the story or what happened to you is still present. Understand? It's not from the past. You're recreating it in the present. Because the only reality is what is in the present. So you're taking something that happened in the past and you're using it to create misery and suffering now. Now. Not 20 years ago. Maybe they created misery and suffering 20 years ago, but if it's still with you, the suffering, the pain, the emotional trauma is still with you. It's still present with you. So in order to heal it, you don't go back to the past and talk about the story. You come into the present moment and you become present with your body and present with what's going on inside of you now, in this moment, in the present. So you go, and how did that make you feel? Well, it made me feel real angry. Where do you feel that anger? What are you talking about? They say. Well, you said you feel angry. Where do you feel the anger? I don't know. I have to say, okay, and a lot of times people can't even correctly identify what they're feeling. Most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, when you first start doing this work with someone, they cannot accurately identify their feelings. They don't know how they feel. They're so used to suppressing, denying, ignoring, not being present with themselves, not being present with their body, not being in tune with their own heart. They don't know how they feel. I have seen people, say, well, I'm really angry about that. I say, well, tune into that anger, and they start crying. Well, that's not anger. That's hurt. They're really hurt. Okay? They're saying they're angry, but what they're really feeling, present moment, with the tears rolling out of our cheeks, is hurt. Okay? And so being able to get a person to tune into what's happening, tune into what's going on inside of themselves right now, in the present, whatever, is the key, because it is that present moment awareness of what is happening now that enables a change to be made. Because the only point at which any change can be made is now. The stimulus is in the past. The response is in the future. The choice is now. As I can't think of the name author right now. I'll go Byron Katie. She says, someone slaps you. She says, well, how do you respond? Well, I'm sure glad that's over. Because the slap is in the past. The slap doesn't exist now. It exists in the past. Right now, I'm choosing how I will react to being slapped, which is how I'm going to choose to my future reaction. All change and all choice is now. This instant. Now is the day of your salvation. Now. Present moment. God's presence is in the present. It's here. It's now. It's not in the future. So let's go back to the slide presentation. I want to talk about the other one that's on this slide because it's really, really powerful. And I actually, Spirit taught me to do this or helped me understand this. I was walking down the street some years ago, and I'm an herbalist. I'm interested in plants, and I was looking at the different plants, and I remember looking at the dandelion. Dandelion Tarexicum officinalis, blah blah blah, Latin name for dandelion. And the Spirit said to me, that dandelion plant is unlike any other dandelion plant in the entire world. And you just looked at it, labeled it, and dismissed it. You never saw it. And whoa. And I realized that's what I'm doing in my life all the time. I'm looking at everything, labeling it, dismissing it. And so I started walking down the street and just looking at things through the eyes of a child. just taking it in, not trying to, I stopped trying to turn it into words and just experienced it. And it was a transformational moment in my life because it cultivated a tremendous sense of learning to be aware. In fact, I was taught how to meditate when I was in college by a couple of college professors. I'd done meditation. This is a meditation too, but it's awake, alive, present moment meditation because you're quieting your mind while you're completely active. You can literally just be observing things, listening to people, watching things, etc. And there are no words going through your brain interpreting it. There's no story you're telling about it. You're just taking it in. And that actually is a place that if you can get to it, when you're sitting with someone, you're trying to help them, most of the time you're sitting there trying to analyze, think about what am I going to say? How am I going to analyze this? How am I going to fix this? Blah, blah, blah. But part of what I learned to do in emotional healing work is I don't think that. I just tune into the person completely. I just totally become absorbed in them, in the feeling I'm sensing from them, in what they're saying, how they're looking, etc. No analysis, no words in my brain at all, except what I'm just the sound, the sights, everything I'm taking from them. And that opens you up to understanding that's difficult to explain unless you actually practice it. Now, from that state of awareness, you can move into this doing that to observe yourself. Most of us do this in arrears. Okay. I mean, how many of you have ever thought, like a day later after something happened, you thought, well, I should have handled it like this, or I should have said this, or I should have done that, right? In introspection and looking at the thing from the past, you realize, well, why didn't I respond to it this way? Well, you responded to it based on a stimulus reaction without any moment of awareness or choice in between. The awareness came afterwards in reflection, and then the idea of choice. So what happens in self-observation is you start to learn to bring that kind of perspective into the present moment with what's happening now in your life instead of thinking about how I should have handled it in the past. And this is self-observation. And as Anthony DeMille says, no one can help you here. No one can show you a method. I can't tell you how to do this. I can't tell you a technique. The moment you pick up a technique, you're programmed. In other words, you're trying to follow the technique instead of just being aware. Self-observation means to watch everything in you and around you as far as possible and watch it like it was happening to someone else, like you were watching a movie. There's this little bit of a detachment. You're not invested in it and blah, 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 and all that kind of. There's this little bit of a detachment. Okay? And he talks about this with your feelings, which is the whole point of what we're talking about in this class. He says, anytime you have a negative feeling toward anyone, you're living in an illusion. There is something seriously wrong with you. This is a very powerful idea. Okay? Anytime you have a negative feeling towards anyone, you're living in an illusion, and there is something seriously wrong with you. You're not seeing reality. Something inside of you has got to change. Now, how do I know that what he's saying is right? It's because I came to this understanding. I have felt, as I've talked about in previous webinars, I have been in the presence of the unconditional love of God. And I have known that unconditional love was for every human being on this planet, not just for me. It was unconditional. It was this love that just swallowed everything up and said, I love you no matter what. So if God, who sees everything with absolute perfect clarity and knows everyone completely and utterly and inside out and upwards and downs and backwards and whatever, sees us, and the only thing he feels towards us is love. I mean, maybe there's a desire for us to grow or prove, but it's always rooted in this feeling of love. Then if we're seeing someone in a different way, if we're seeing them in a negative way, if we're seeing them in an angry way or whatever, we are not seeing them as God sees them. We're seeing them through our own story, through our own stimulus response, through our own reactions. And so he says, something inside of you has to change. But what do we generally do when we have a negative feeling? He's to blame. She's to blame. She's got to change. He's got to change. My kids have got to change. And he says, no, the world's all right. Everything around you is all right. The one who has to change is you. You have to see it through a different lens. You have to rewrite the story. You have to change the belief systems, because if you were seeing it the way God sees it, you would see it through the eyes of love. Understand? And that is a great awareness. You stub your toe. He says the rock is not to blame. There's nothing wrong with the rock. The rock was just sitting there peacefully, minding its own business, and you ran your toe into it. And then you are mad at the rock, right? That's the way we are with life. Okay. And I got into this a little in the first module about, prayer as listening to God, but and the idea of meditation. I know that, like I said in that module, a lot of Christians get really hung up on idea of meditation, that it's some kind of Eastern philosophy or whatever. But literally, I read this book called "Let There Be Light," and I've forgotten the author's name right now, but it's based on an understanding of the Aramaic culture out of which the Bible was written. And what he says in there is in the Aramaic language of that culture in which the Bible was written, when someone says the word of the Lord came unto me, or the Spirit of the Lord came upon me, or whatever, that is an idiomatic expression, meaning I was in meditation and this happened. So all through the Bible, people are meditating and receiving visions and revelation and information. And so meditation, as I said, is a way of listening. And in order to meditate, you have to learn to shut off the little story and monkey chatter that's going in your head, that's analyzing everything and interpreting everything and blah, 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 blah. And you have to get to a state of present moment awareness where you can quiet that down and actually see what is. It's difficult to do, okay, because we have the habit of mental chatter and all that stuff. But if you practice it, it becomes easier the more you practice it. And the keys to basically creating that inner silence are tuning in your body. Now, see, one of the first steps in this is you relax your body, which means you tune in your body, you feel where you have muscle tension, and you just consciously let your body relax. Maybe tense your shoulders if they're tense, and then let them relax. Tense your arms if they're tense, let them relax. Then you breathe deeply. And you just let yourself breathe slowly and deeply. And then you create a single point of focus. Now, the single point of focus is the key on this whole thing. Remember, I talked about you can start observing things without analyzing them? Well, if you take anything, a fire, a candle flame, anything that you're looking at, and you just observe it with all your constant powers of concentration, so that you are not interpreting it, analyzing it, turning it into words. You're just experiencing it as a single point of focus in a relaxed, deep breathing state. You will start to move into the brain waves, and I think it's the theta brain waves, which are associated with meditation. And you then are opening yourself into a different thing and having a passive attitude, so that you then, this is where you start stepping back, and the thought comes into your mind, and you just go, oh, and it's not your thought, it's just a thought flowing through your mind. Well, that's an interesting thought, blah, blah, blah. You step back, you start to develop this power of self-observation, of seeing yourself as if you were watching another person. And Scudder, in his book Specific Diagnosis, talks about this with educating the senses, learning to let your senses really be in tune with what's going on in the environment. And he says most persons think that the human senses are natural, not acquired. This is a great mistake. As any organ or part is rightly used, it grows in capacity. Man has 5 senses of touch, taste, hearing, smell, all require training. We cultivate the senses by continually using them, and their education is the work of months and years. In other words, most people are living in a preconceived, prejudiced state of mind in which they've already analyzed and made up a story about everything that they can, like I did with the dandelion. You look at the thing and you label it and dismiss it. I already know that. I already figured out. This is the ultimate egotistical thing. I already understand. I already know that. I've already figured that out. I know what a dandelion is, but that dandelion is unlike any other dandelion in the world. This moment is unlike any other moment that's ever been before in the world. All the people around me are not fixed little things of boxes that I put them in, that this person is selfish or that person is angry or this person is good or this blah, blah, blah. No, none of that is real. That's all stuff we create in our mind, because this moment, that person is different than they were a moment ago. And so we cultivate the senses. We learn to really see. We learn to really hear. We learn to really feel and understand in our heart things. And this is a work, like he says, of months and years. It is not something you do all the time. So here's a couple of practical exercises for this. Take 15, 20 minutes in any environment. Look around at everything very carefully and avoid putting labels on to anything. Don't look at anything and turn it into words. Just experience it. That's the first exercise. Second exercise is take something that involves touch, such as washing the dishes, rubbing someone's feet, and just there's a story in Anthony Miller's book, Conversation with the Masters, where there's something about washing the dishes, and he says, the master says, I wonder if he can wash the dishes, and he says something about, well, I'm sure he can. He says, I didn't, and he says, I didn't say whether he could get the dishes clean or not. I was wondering if he could actually wash the dishes. Meaning that he could just be present with washing the dishes. Because if you're sitting there washing the dishes, oh, I hate this job, blah, 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 this is horrible, da, da, da. You're not present with washing the dishes. You're involved in the story in your head. You're involved in whatever you're telling yourself about this. You're thinking about, why do I have to do all these dishes? Why can't somebody else do dishes? Why did my kids dirty so many cups? Blah, blah, blah. But if you can just go into the thing and just feel it, be present, wash the dishes, touch something, feel something. Rub your partner's feet and just be totally absorbed in rubbing their feet. Be totally absorbed in anything. By the way, that's the secret to a great connection with a partner, is if you can be totally present with kissing them, totally present with hugging them, totally present with touching them. Instead of, as you're hugging them, you're thinking about something else, blah, blah, blah. Instead, you're tuned into the hug. You're tuned into them. You're tuned. This is a thing to do. This is what Anthony DeMello says, 4 Steps to Wisdom. I really love this. Is one of my favorite books from him, Awareness by Anthony DeMello. I highly recommend this book, Awareness, and his other book, The Path to Love. But he says, 1, get in touch with your negative feelings. In other words, when you're feeling a negative feeling, recognize it. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm jealous. I'm ashamed. I'm afraid. Okay. Second step, understand that feeling is not being caused by what's out there. That feeling is inside of you. I like what Wayne Dyer says. He says, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Orange juice. Is the squeezing what created the orange juice, or was the orange juice inside the orange to begin with? He says, so when you're squeezed, when life puts you into a difficult circumstance, challenge, a stressful thing, and out comes anger, or out comes fear, or out comes jealousy, or out comes whatever, that was inside of you. It wasn't, the external environment didn't create it. The external environment squeezed it out of you. And this relates to a metaphor that's in Scripture that I once I understood this metaphor, it's beautiful. Okay, there's a passage of Scripture that talks about refining our souls, like the refiner's fire, and this relates to how they would refine precious metals like gold and silver. If you heat the metal, in other words, heat the ore, you heat it until you melt it, right? And it's just hot, and you just keep that heat on it, and you keep that pressure on the thing. Then what happens is all the impurities rise to the surface where they can be skimmed off. Okay, so as you put the gold or the silver under that intense heat, that intense pressure, then the purities rise to the surface, and then the refiner scrapes them off. And the refiner knows when the gold is pure or the silver is pure when they look down and the gold or silver is now a mirror and they can see their face in it. There are no more impurities there. So life is a refiner's fire. We're being squeezed under pressure. And out come our negative feelings for one purpose and one purpose only. So if we let God, if we turn over and say, God, look, I'm angry, I'm having this problem, blah, 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 then God can say, sure. And he can scrape that away from us till he purifies us, till he cleanses our heart, cleanses our soul. You just have to not identify with the feeling and make it you. It isn't you. It's something that comes from conditioning in the past. And I would add in here the step of like turning it to God. And then you understand that if you let God change you, the world will change. Life will change. Your experience of what goes on outside of you will change when your experience of what on the inside of how you interpret that, how you see that, how you're aware of that changes. Your whole experience of will change. And he adds this thing, the world is right because I feel good. That's what all the mystics are saying. He says, most of us think that, I feel good, therefore in other words, the world around us has to be right before we feel good. He says, no, when we feel good, in other words, when we learn to cultivate the goodness inside of us, the world looks right. We see the world through a different lens. This is about what awareness really is. This is what I've come to understand. God dwells in the eternal presence, and love and light are found in the awareness of God's presence here and now in this present moment. So, with that, I'm going to stop the slide presentation. Because I've been on the slide presentation, I haven't been looking at the chat. The books, Awareness and the Path to Love, I got them in one set. They're available as individual books, but I also found a book that had both of the books in one book. And it's wonderful. The book on awareness is where he talks about this, how we bring the interpretation to the world around us. And he gives the example. He says, like, I fall in love with someone. And when I fall in love with them, I see them through rose-colored glasses, and I see them as this answer to all my problems, all my prayers, and they're beautiful, and blah, 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 blah. And he says, that's illusion. I'm not seeing them for they are. I'm seeing them from the lens I'm projecting onto them. Okay? And then I get to know them. And then I find out they're not perfect, and they've got flaws like me. And they struggle with things like me, and they're a human being just like me. Okay. And then I become disillusioned, which being disillusioned, he says, is a good thing, except for the fact that we usually, when we become disillusioned, we replace one illusion with another illusion. Now I replace the illusion that they're wonderful with the illusion that they're bad. And then everything they do, I interpret through the lens that they're bad. See, before I interpreted everything through the lens they were good, but all that was coming from inside of me. Had nothing to do with them. I wasn't even seeing them. I was seeing them through the eyes of my own desires and aversions. That's how most of us are seeing the world. We're seeing the whole world through the lens of good and evil, but that good and evil isn't, the idea of real good or real evil. It's the idea of what I desire and what I don't desire. What pleases me is good and what doesn't please me is evil, right? But that's all inside of me, right? Oh yeah, someone gave the author of Let There Be Light is Rico, Roccoerrico, and it was an incredibly useful book for understanding scripture because it really just gave an understanding of the culture and the idioms and the things that are in there that people did. Let me look at some of the comments here. Oh, someone just was saying they were wondering about how to break habit and just realized it was a habit. Yeah, habit force. Napoleon Hill talks about this at Habit Force, that what we do repeatedly, we create a habit. It becomes habit. And to break any habit requires a conscious awareness that I want to change this, and a decision to change it. And it takes about 2 to 3 weeks of altering my behavior to set up a new habit. All right. So I'm literally constantly conditioning myself with habits of looking at the world, habits of thinking, habits of feeling, habits of doing things. And what this whole lesson is saying is if I'm miserable, okay, then I've got bad habits. I've created a way of looking at the world. I've created a way of thinking about the world. I've created a way of thinking about other people and about life that isn't real. It's an illusion. If I was seeing it clearly, the way God sees it, it would be totally different. So, ever since I learned this, I can tell you, whenever I'm having conflict with a person and I'm feeling frustrated, angry with them, I say this little prayer. I said, God, help me see this person through your eyes. And I have a particular person in my life that I've been saying that prayer a lot with, because I know that I have to see things differently in order to create healing and change. It's me that has to change. In other words, if I'm not getting the good reaction with someone in my family, then they're the representation of the refiner's fire. They're putting the squeeze on me to force out of there. So I become aware, you know what? I mean, my wife and I were talking about this the other night. You can think, oh, look how good I am, blah, 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 blah. And then you get, and I can have, I'm a loving person. I'm kind, but then you get into certain situations and all of a sudden anger comes out of you, or, frustration comes out of you, or blah, 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 comes out of you. And you realize, oh, wait a minute. I guess I'm not so good after all. But see, our tendency is we want to go, oh, see, that's just the other person's fault. But no, this is our opportunity. And once I realize this, I realize that all relationships and everything that happens to me and whatever is squeezing me and bringing to the surface what God wants to take out of me, to purify me, to make me till I reflect his image. That's the metaphor, you understand? God sits as the refiner of the souls of men, and when he has taken all the dross out of us and can see his reflection in us, he knows we're pure. That's a beautiful metaphor, isn't it? An amazing idea. Someone says, if you consider it, it's the tone of voice, the facial expressions, the other things around it that we've taught children to be hurt by these words because they see us being hurt by those words. It's actually conditioning they learn. If we teach them that the words have no power and show them by our own actions that it's true, the words don't have power. That's really, really true. That's a great observation. Thank you for sharing that. It's been fascinating to watch both ways as I've seen friends parent and know it's really so simple. I used to give a lot of power to words, a lot of it. Yeah, Byron Katie. That's the person that I mentioned. I was trying to think of her name earlier. Um, uh, she has a book called The Work, and that's another great resource for helping people heal emotionally. But we are caught up in the illusion of words, and it's what Byron Katie's work is really all about, is saying that our emotions are coming from the things we're telling ourselves about what is happening, from the story we're telling about what is happening. It's not from what is happening. It's from the story that we interpret what is happening. And she goes through a process whereby you see that story in a different way. And when you see it for what it is, you have this sense of peace and you go, oh, I get it. How long will it take you to solve your problem? Not 1 second longer than it takes you to understand it. Negative words. Okay, here's the thing. It isn't the words. It isn't the words. It is the emotion with which the words that are delivered that hurt people. Understand? The words become associated with the violence and the accusation and the negative energy that the person delivers them with. In other words, that's what creates the thing. If I picked any word, it's just a symbol, right? It's just a symbol, okay? And every time I got mad at you, I said apple, 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 okay? You would negatively react to the word apple. Understand? Because it would be associated with your subconscious mind with stimulus response. Apple means anger. Words are not real. But see, even if someone was saying, want an apple? I'd react negatively. Apple, okay? Because I am reacting out of my conditioning. We give the power to the words through our conditioning. Okay? Because words do influence people. They do, but here's the thing. As you I'm running out of time, but I want to just say something. You can program people, and this is what powerful people do. They program people. Parents do it, governments do it, etc. They program people to react to words so they can control and manipulate them through words. Oh yeah, and that's what's going on. So yeah, I do need to create the list of books and everything. One of my friends says Apple computers mean anger because I get frustrated, don't understand them. PC computers are angry to me. I love Apple computers. But see, that's the thing, is most of our stuff is very personal, right? Very personal. What causes me to become distressed or what I like is very different than what somebody else gets distressed or likes. And that's the proof that it's coming from inside of me, not from the thing itself. Okay? Anyway, all of this is, someone said, it's laying down new neurological pathways. You can lay down new neurological pathways, which is what the healing is all about. All right. So this is our final lesson from this module. If you go to treelight.com, TREELIT.com, I have up the registration page for Module 3, which will start in July. In Module 3, we will be discussing specific tools and techniques in emotional healing. I'm going to introduce my model of emotional anatomy, which is one of the ways I rapidly assess what's going on with people. I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the concept of emotional anatomy. We're going to talk about one of the most powerful techniques I use, the question affirmation technique. We're going to do two sessions on flower essences, 2 sessions on aromatherapy. We're also going to talk about breathing and movement patterns and healing rituals that you use to help break through what we call body armor, which is the tension we hold in our bodies to keep us from feeling and moving in awareness. And we're also going to talk about symbolic journeys and mental tools, which are probably some of the most powerful emotional healing techniques and some of the most difficult to master. Module 4 will go through in great detail the emotional anatomy model and all the different energy centers and reiterate flower essences, essential oils, and techniques to use on all of them. But this is going to be an overview of all of the techniques. Anyway, the registration is open for this. Also, I will remind everybody, we've been in a little bit of cash crunch. We're just barely starting to get some of our products back online. Anything you can do to contribute anything to us, really appreciate it. Also, I will be emailing everybody with the link to the class. And also, I am available for individual emotional consults on a limited basis. I'm going to send out the link for scheduling those to people as well. Quite a few people have scheduled some for this coming week with me. Thanks, everybody, for being part of this class. Please share this class with other people. This video, like all the others, will be up on YouTube. You can share the videos on social media to anybody who needs to hear these messages. And again, thanks for participating, and I'll hope to catch all of you on the next module. Good night.